The Progress Center provides information, resources, tools, and technical assistance services to support local educators in developing and implementing high-quality education programs that enable children with disabilities to make progress and meet challenging goals. Again, we encourage you to visit us at www.promotingprogress.org to learn more. As I mentioned, my name is Shidi Ajasamali. I'll be moderating today's forum as well as the Q&A at the end of each session. I'd also like to welcome Dr. David Emmenheiser, who is the Progress Center's Project Officer at the Office of Special Education Programs, and Pamela Allen, who is the Education Program Specialist at the Office of Non-Public Education, both at the U.S. Department of Education. They both have been great collaborators and partners in planning this forum. I'm also excited to introduce Dr. Crystalline Brown, who is the keynote for our forum. She is the Intensive Technical Assistance Co-Lead at the Progress Center and a Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Center on Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports, both at the American Institutes for Research. Before we begin, I would like to give a few minutes to both David and Pamela to say a few words. David?
Thank you, Shidi. And welcome and greetings to you whenever you are joining us. As Shidi said, this is recorded and it will be archived. So I do hope that you share this with all of your colleagues and come back and watch it again to get more information that you might have missed the first time through. I want to start by just saying thank you. These are really difficult times in schools, facing a lot of challenges. And I know that your perseverance, your excellence is what's making a difference to students and their families in their education. So thank you for doing that and for continuing with that. The great thing of what we're doing today is the Department of Ed does fund some resources, some tools to be able to help you do that work. And these, because they're funded through federal dollars, through taxpayer dollars, that means that they're free to anybody who wants to use them. The office that I work in, as Shidi said, is the Office of Special Education Programs, and it's our job to help build the capacity to serve children with disabilities and their families. And, you know, we at the federal level need to talk about it in terms of children with disabilities because that's what the law says. But we know that your schools think about these students in many different ways and not necessarily as a student with a disability. And when I was going through my teacher training, I heard a really great quote that has stuck with me all these years, and that is, good teaching is good teaching. So whether you're talking about a child with a disability, or you're talking about a child with gifted and talented, or you're talking about any other kind of child, it is a good teaching strategies are what make that child blossom and bloom. These resources that you're going to hear today are not about identification or about funding or things like that. We have developed a resource, questions and answers that cover some of those issues. I'm going to drop that link into the chat. So if you want to learn more about those topics, that's the place where you can go and get those answers. And then if you have further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Pamela if you do have further clarifications on those issues. But today we're going to be talking about the capacity. We're going to be talking about serving different kinds of students in ways that they really can thrive. And so we look forward to hearing from you. There will be more opportunities. This is going to be just the maybe the beginning of what we call the discussion on what we call the multiple tiered systems of support. And There will be an open door that is coming up in November, and Shidi will talk a little bit more about that, where you can have maybe more of an opportunity for a dialogue about these issues and how to implement them. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Pamela to offer her welcome.
Thank you so much, David, and good morning. You know, as Shidi and David have said, we're so glad that you made it a priority to join us for this forum for the private school community today. And my name is Pamela Allen, and I am with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Non-Public Education, or ONPE, as we often call it. And ONPE was established by Congress in 1978 with the mission of fostering the maximum participation of private school students and teachers in federal education programs and initiatives. And since the initial passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, in 1965, private school students and teachers have been eligible to participate in certain federal education programs. And the programs for private school students are often typically referred to as equitable services programs. And the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, contains such provisions. So knowing that even though today's session isn't going to be talking about the equitable services provisions, we wanted to know where you can find details about that. So I'll drop a link to our website in the chat in just a few minutes, and that way you can visit our site after today's forum to explore more. You know, at the U.S. Department of Education, we are very mindful of the independence and autonomy of private schools in our country. And we're also mindful that you serve students of all ability levels. So with this in mind, we hope that today's forum will help you find enhanced ways of supporting the diverse learners in your schools and help them gain greater access to the curriculum so that you can, those students can grow and learn and realize their full potential. And don't forget what David just mentioned about the upcoming open door gathering for the private school community on November 15th. We hope you'll be able to join us for that as well. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful that you're here, and it really is our pleasure to serve you. So Shidi, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. So we have a little bit of recognition. So on September 19th, U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona recognized 297 schools, both public and non-public, as National Blue Ribbon Schools for 2022. Next slide, please. The recognition is based on a school's overall academic performance or progress in closing achievement gaps among student subgroups. Secretary Cardona made the announcement during his Road to Success Back to School bus tour. We would like to congratulate the 24 non-public schools who were recognized with this great achievement. Okay, so our next slide, please. I'm really happy to introduce Dr. Chrissy Brown. She is a technical assistance co-lead for the Progress Center and is also on the MTSS technical assistance team, where she works with a number of sites. Dr. Brown supports states, educational prep programs, school districts to build their capacity to implement evidence-based practices within MTSS. Her professional interests are in the area of intensive interventions for behavior, multi-tiered systems of supports, evidence-based practices, professional development, and culturally responsive classroom behavior strategies. She has a doctorate from the University of Illinois at Chicago and a master's degree in special education from the Governors State University. She is also a former elementary, middle, and high school special education teacher. Dr. Brown enjoys advocating for students as well as helping educators build knowledge and culturally responsive best practices to meet the needs of all students. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brown.
Well, thank you very much, Shidi, for that amazing introduction. I am very happy to be here with all of you to discuss leveraging tiered systems of supports to meet the diverse needs of all students. So as we begin, can we just take a moment to drop in the chat, how do we ensure that all students are on the path to progress? Just share in the chat a few ways that you are ensuring that all students are on the path to progress. Looking for growth? Thank you for sharing that. Are there other ways? What are some other ways that we are ensuring that students are on the path for progress? Benchmark assessments throughout the year? Yes. Well, thank you for sharing those answers. Mia, you can go to the next slide, please. So remember, there is no way a single teacher has all the time and all the knowledge and all the skills to meet all the needs of every child in his or her classroom. We must use a collective approach. Next slide, please. We need a sustainable ecosystem with the capacity to develop and implement high-quality educational programming for all students, including students with disabilities. So how do we do this? How do we build a sustainable ecosystem for all? We need collective efficacy. And what exactly is collective efficacy? We define collective efficacy, teacher efficacy, as the collective belief of educators in their ability to positively affect students. Collective efficacy is more than just beliefs. It is built on evidence of impact. You have collective beliefs that you can make a difference, times the evidence you are making a difference, and then we have an estimated effect value of 1.57. So that means that the growth for student growth is impacted by collective efficacy. So collective beliefs that you can make a difference and evidence that you are making a difference. So you have to have some evidence there. It's not just the beliefs, but what's the evidence that are tied to those beliefs. So let's take a moment to discuss MTSS, our multi-tiered systems of support. MTSS provides the data and the infrastructure necessary to develop collective efficacy. And in our current graphic, there are essential components here that build those infrastructures. So you have the screening. We start with the screening process, as well as progress monitoring. Then we have database decision-making, which built our multi-level prevention system. So it's about the prevention, not just intervening, but also prevention. MTSS also provides the data necessary for decision-making. And there are many levels and layers that are included in this collaborative system. You have organizational system. How do we improve school supports to improve outcomes? You have the school system. How do we improve teacher supports to improve outcomes? As well as the educator level. How do we improve student level supports to improve outcomes? And Dr. Tessie Bailey is dropping in the chat the link to the MTSS Center where you can view some of the additional resources. So remember, there's an organizational system, a school system, and an educator level systems, and we're all leading to increasing student outcomes. MTSS also promotes positive student and school outcomes. Improved performance outcomes looks at a decrease in expulsion, behavior referrals, as well as suspension rates, sustaining academic improvements, and increasing on-time graduation rates. There's also strong positive effects on system outcomes. Those effects include increased instructional and planning time, more efficient use of resources and staff, decreasing inappropriate special education referrals and placement rates, a reduction in student time in special education services, and a reduction in student grade retention. So again, MTSS promotes positive student outcomes for all. So what is MTSS? Well, it's a multi-tier system of supports. It's a proactive and preventive framework. It integrates data and instruction to maximize student achievement and supports. The MTSS framework is comprised of 4 essential components: the screening, the progress monitoring, the multi-level prevention system, as well as data-based decision-making. Our MTSS framework is driven by data, as well as all of our instruction practices. They're very database driven. Now take a moment and review the image. What do you see? What stands out to you? If you're able to, please share in the chat which of the elements is a critical element in your MTSS framework.
So Chrissy, it does appear that the chat is not enabled, but if you do look in the Q&A, you'll be able to see other folks' responses. So feel free to input your comments into the Q&A for Chrissy to see.
Thank you, Tessie. So in the chat, please, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A, please share of the 4 essential components for our MTSS framework. Screening, thank you for sharing that, Mindy. Screening is an essential component. Interventions. Data is at the center, progress monitoring, use of data, database decision. So a lot around the use of data and database decision making. Thank you for sharing those. Next slide, please. So again, MTSS provides a continuum of supports. We have Tier 1, our universal level of prevention, our Tier 2, our targeted level of prevention, and then Tier 3, our most intensive level of prevention. Students with disabilities, gifted and talented, and English learners needs, they receive services at all levels depending on the need. So you can have a student who is considered an English learner receive Tier 3 supports as well as Tier 1 supports. That can also be the same for students with disabilities. They could receive Tier 3 supports in one subject and maybe Tier 1 supports in another subject. There's a continuum of supports. Again, there is no need to label students by needs. MTSS addresses the needs of the whole child by aligning systems and supports. So we don't say a Tier 2 child, but we say a child who's receiving Tier 2 supports. And they can receive supports in reading, math, engagement, written expression, attendance, emotional skills, communication skills. The supports go across subjects and content areas. So let's look at some data. MTSS at the local level. There's a national finding from a study that says only 28% of educators say that they are far along in implementing a tiered support framework. Most schools and districts are just at the beginning of their MTSS implementation journey with room to grow. Let's look at implementation at the local level. So where are interventions focused? Well, 74% of schools are reporting a focus at the literacy ELA level, 65% at the behavior level, math, 58%, social emotional learning, 41%, attendance, 32%, and 1% for other. Schools using PBIS, there has been an increase in the number of schools using PBIS over time to address the needs of students with behavior concerns. So the success of MTSS boils down to one simple equation. The design, so again, back to our framework, our screening, database decision-making, progress monitoring, and multi-level prevention systems, times the infrastructure, a look at leadership, effective teaming, professional learning, family and community engagement, and last but certainly not least, times the implementation. What does it look like to actually implement these essential components? Multi-tier system supports, or MTSS, is a preventive framework. We'll talk more about each of the components in the upcoming slides.
Chrissy, we got a question on what is PBIS. Can you share what that is?
Yes, and so PBIS, the Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, and actually later today in this presentation, we will have a panel discussion about PBIS and the supports and resources that they have. Tessie, did you want to say?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we will have an upcoming presentation following the panel about PBIS and those supports and resources, but it is the Positive Behavior Intervention Supports organization. So let's dive into lessons learned from 20 years of implementation, starting with implementation and outcomes in mind. So you have to start the design with the right questions in mind. What do we want for our children, educators, and schools? What is our current reality and who are the players? What do our children, educators, and schools need to be successful? And how can we maximize our resources to support students, teachers, and schools? Let's just take a minute and reflect on the questions in front of us. In the Q&A, can you share any additional questions that you think of when you're thinking about designing with the right questions in mind? Are there any other essential questions that you would add to our current list of questions? And I'll review the Q&A and share out. And Dr. Bailey has shared a PBIS link in the chat for your review to learn more about PBIS. It's important to identify who the we and our is, parents, staff, community. Thank you for sharing that. So identifying, I guess, as well as defining. Staff capacity to implement with fidelity versus use old existing strategies. How do we get all stakeholders involved? These are great essential questions and statements. Are there any other essential questions with designing with the right questions in mind? Well, thank you for sharing those. Mia, can we move to the next slide? So when selecting evidence-based practices and tools, consider effectiveness as well as efficiency. What's ideal versus realistic? So we always have, in our ideal world, we would have all of these resources and all of this time with all of this capacity. But we have to design with the realistic, what's our current framework? What are our current needs and our current capacity? So focus on practices that are fair. I love this acronym. I just learned this acronym this year from the amazing Dr. Tessie Bailey. But we start with we look at FAIR, the feasibility, the cost, specialized training, or complexity are feasible within our current context. Acceptability. Is it acceptable for impacted stakeholders, including teachers, leaders, and families? The impact. Is there evidence that it produced positive results on desired outcomes? The strength of the effects and the amount of evidence. Relevance. What is the research demonstrates impacts in similar settings and with children with similar characteristics? Age, grade, consider cultural, the needs, the socioeconomic status of our students. So again, this is a great acronym to think about when you're thinking about the focus on practices: the feasibility, the acceptability, the impact, and the relevance. And Dr. Tessie Bailey just dropped a link in the chat that is a resource connected to the FAIR acronym we just discussed. Remember, there is no single evidence-based practice that works for every student in every situation. We have to think about the context, the capacity, and the need of all of our staff as well as our students. Again, assessment must drive instruction. Starting with the appropriate screening and benchmarking, it helps us identify students who may need additional support and intervention. Progress monitoring, it helps identify when an instructional change is needed. Our diagnostic data, that deeper dive, it helps identify how to adapt and or modify instruction. And fidelity, it helps identify if implementation adjustments are needed before other changes. We have to start with the fidelity. Was the intervention implemented with fidelity initially before we decide to make any changes or adapt? We must maintain a focus on student outcomes, the why. Why are we implementing MTSS? Not just the process, the how, but the why. Starting back and remembering the why helps us regain focus and adjust accordingly. We can have a beautiful process and it can be very well written, but if we don't think about the outcome and the why, sometimes we lose sight when we think, oh, it's not working. Again, remember the why. Effective MTSS implementation depends on quality Tier 1 core programming. When you have quality Tier 1 programming and increased collective efficacy at Tier 1 leads to a decreased need for Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Again, we have to start with our foundation. Making sure that you have a strong foundation ensures that we're trying to reach all students. And if we have less students at Tier 2 and Tier 3 needing Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, then we are having a greater impact on all students. Fidelity matters. The impact of MTSS depends on the extent to which educators implement the well-designed system in a sustainable ecosystem. Let's look at this graphic here. It's starting with, is there evidence that the intervention was delivered as intended? Adherence, how well do we stick to the plan, the curriculum, or assessment? Are the interventions and assessment delivered consistently across different teachers and settings? Exposure duration, does the schedule allow the intervention to be delivered for the recommended dosage? How often does the student receive an intervention? How long does it last? Is the teacher regularly available to support instruction? The quality of delivery. Does the interventionist have the necessary training, the knowledge and skills to deliver the intervention correctly? Are quality teaching practices used consistently and with appropriate intensity across all sessions? Program specificity. How well is the intervention defined and different from other interventions? And student engagement. How attentive and involved are the students in this intervention or activity? And I believe Dr. Bailey dropped the link to this graphic. You can find it at intensiveintervention.org, the 5 elements fidelity. Remember, plan big, but start small. Sometimes we want to jump all in and target academic and behavior and SEL all at once, but sometimes we need to, while you have a big plan, start small. What does your action plan look like? What are your year 1 goals? How are you piloting and maybe scaling up and then sustaining your framework? We have additional resources here at the Center on Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports at the American Institute for Research. I believe the link was dropped in the chat. You can drop down for each tab. There's essential components. We discussed the essential components of an MTSS framework, the implementation, there's resources. There's also the ability to request support. We have special topics as well as our expertise. And then there's also a library of supports that you can search. Dr. Bailey, did you want to say anything about the Center on Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports?
No, I just want to let you all know I put some links in the chat box, and there was a request for a copy of the links, and we will add those to the recording website, so you can link to all of those. But I'll put the main website for the center in the chat box again for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to Sheedy. I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but thank you for joining us today to just get a brief overview. I'll just say an overview of some of the resources and supports that are out there.
Thank you, Chrissy, so much. This was a great presentation. It looks like we have a few minutes for a couple of questions. Is it okay? They've kind of come through, and I just wanted to address those if that's okay with you.
Yes.
The first one is, what are the ways schools can promote collective teacher efficacy?
So we have a lot of resources on teaming. I think starting with a very team-based approach, making sure that everyone understands the same language when discussing efficacy and identifying needs for students and thinking about supports. But I think starting with teaming, making sure that we're all using the same language. Dr. Bailey just dropped some teaming tools resources as well in the chat, but that's what I would say. Start with teaming, getting a universal foundation of language and systems in place.
Thank you, Chrissy. And then our final question, how do I know the data that I'm collecting is the right data?
Oh, that is a very good question. I would say looking at student growth and student outcomes. Like, what's the impact of that data on instruction and student growth and student outcomes? How is the student progressing within instruction as well as on assessments? So not just assessments, because we know all students may not perform well on assessments, whether or not they know the content or not, but what about just good instruction? How are they progressing within the classroom with your instruction?
Thank you, Chrissy. This was super helpful. I really appreciate your time, and we're excited to have you today.
Thank you.
So we're going to move into our next session. I'm really happy to introduce our panel today. They're going to provide us a window into how a private school has implemented the interventions and supports that Chrissy discussed successfully. Our panel of private school educators and parents will share how they are using interventions and extra supports to meet student needs. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce our panel. Gabby Aragon will be the moderator for this session. She has also played a key part in planning this forum. Ms. Aragon is a student support specialist at St. Austin Catholic School. She also plays a key role with the Progress Center, where she is an educator in residence. So the Progress Center's educator in residence is comprised of a diverse group of dynamic educators who work alongside center staff to ensure stakeholder perspectives are represented in our center's activities. The educator in residence also develop a community, so they collectively tackle tough questions that are facing the field today and are valued by centered staff for their unique perspectives. They are truly our partners, our thought leaders, and our eyes and ears to the field. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Tara Savalos, who is a principal at St. Austin Catholic School. This year will be her 6th year as principal and 13th year with the school. Prior, Ms. Savalos was the academic learning specialist and director of curriculum at St. Austin Catholic School, where she was responsible for the dyslexia intervention, language arts curriculum coordination and professional development, RTI administration, school-wide accommodations coordination, and Title I management. Tara is a certified academic language therapist, a qualified instructor, and a licensed dyslexia therapist since 2010. She also has a master's degree in special education, specializing in dyslexia through Midwestern State University. Next, we have Barbara Kennedy. She's been teaching for 40 years. 13 of those years were in the public school system, and the others have been spent teaching at private Catholic school. She has taught 1st through 8th grade and served as an athletic director for a few years. And for about 5 of those years, she was a principal at the Catholic school. Ms. Kennedy's passion is definitely in the classroom. She loves to be with children to get them excited to learn and to take that learning into the real world. She believes there's nothing more satisfying than watching the kids have those aha moments. Ms. Kennedy has even been lucky enough to become co-workers with several of her former students. When she's not at school, she enjoys spending her time with her family and her 2 dogs. And finally, we have Lauren Paver. She is the parent of Brennan, who's in 8th grade, Quinn, who's in 5th, and Fitz, who's in 2nd. They all attend St. Austin Catholic School since pre-K. All 3 of the children have received intervention and support services on their educational journey. So as I said, today our panelists will unpack how supports and interventions are embedded not only in the curriculum, but also the school's culture. Panelists will share their experiences from a variety of perspectives, including the parents and teachers. Their conversations will stem from 2 main questions. How have you built a culture of supports and interventions at your school that puts the child at the center? And how are stakeholders included in many stages of supports and interventions? As I mentioned earlier, Ms. Aragon will be facilitating this thought-provoking discussion with her colleague. Gabby, I'm going to hand this over to you.
All right, so thank you so much for the introduction. My role as a student support specialist, I'm kind of the connector between the teachers, families, and students of our entire campus. Pre-K 3 through 8th grade. So I support with strategies and interventions, both in behavior and academic areas, and also working to directly teach students or teachers coping skills or meeting with parents. I kind of do all of those combined into one role for our entire campus, but I'm here not only for our teachers, our students, but also for our staff and making sure that everyone has the resources that they need and the connections that they need. So let's go to the questions. So how have you built a culture of supports and interventions at your school that puts the child at the center? And I think going to Tara, our principal, would be the best way to start because she kind of has that umbrella overview of kind of where we've been and where we are now.
Thanks, Gabby. This has been a lifelong process for me here at St. Austin's. I've been here 13 years and really been working on creating this culture of supports. So the way that I have tried to make this the best benefit for all stakeholders involved, parents, teachers, students, other faculty, and our therapists, is for us to have an open dialogue and really that leading our conversation. So being curious, everyone has a seat at that table, and recognizing that in that open dialogue and that curiosity, we have to be leading with empathy on that journey. I kind of take it from the mindset of an archaeological dig. So every little piece that we uncovered somehow fits that total piece of the puzzle, which the puzzle is the student, right? And it's the student's brain typically. So from that, you know, just having that frame of mind is able to build a better culture to support that student, because if we can have empathy with the parents and their journey and the student and their journey, we will be better seated at that table. Intentionality is another super important thing, is being intentional about our whole child approach. I know a lot of us use that term. It's thrown around a lot, but that really means kind of considering the where they're at and meeting them there, which requires us to have insight into and knowledge about the many different learning struggles that we see predominantly at our school or within our diocese. And from that information, it's important for me to make sure that our teachers and our parents and other students in class all have that information. So professional development or parent development or child development regarding learning differences. So for instance, dyslexia, ADHD, speech and language, dysgraphia. So those are kind of the ones that we see the most here at our school. Autism. So really that culture of supports, open dialogue, curiosity, learning about each other, meeting everyone where they're at, and then collaborating with outside experts, so therapists, so certified academic language therapists, speech paths, diagnosticians, OTs, PTs, BCBAs, and recognizing that when we do have these hard conversations, that parents may be coming from a place of fear, or teachers sometimes too. So recognizing that, and again, leaning in with curiosity more often so that we are all here to support each other. That helps us be able to have a culture of strong supports for our students at a top level.
Wow, it sounds like a lot. I think that one of the things you noted, and you said it in a bunch of different ways, and I found that to be really insightful, is that communication. Whether it's the open dialogue, the communication between teachers and students, the communication between teachers and support staff, and the communication between the students and the teachers. That's so big in how we kind of work through this system together as a team. And I think that goes directly into kind of Barbara's role as a classroom teacher in all of this, and the biggest pieces of communication and observation and the data analysis that we all do.
Yeah. And I can just say, you know, I've been at St. Austin's for many, many years, and I have seen this evolve into what it is now. And we are in such a better place than we were even, you know, 5-10 years ago. So, and yeah, I owe a lot of that to Gabby and to Tara for bringing it on board. But this is such a big part of our culture. And, you know, Tara and Gabby do a whole lot of check-ins with us. We have weekly team meetings where they, you know, come in and ask us, you know, are you having any problems with any kids? What can we do to help support that? We are given accommodation sheets at the beginning of every year for any kids who are identified. So we know going into the year who those kids are, what we need to do for them. One thing I'm most impressed about that we've implemented is that we try to catch the kids early, so that by the time they get to their into the intermediate grades, we already know what we're dealing with, and that kids still get pulled out for tutoring, etc. But the main piece is taken care of before they get into, you know, hopefully by 4th grade, for, you know, for sure by 5th. Also, I get to help plan the schedules for the school, and just the whole planning piece of all this is a huge piece. We have to check the schedules, we have to get with the cults, we have to get with the outside support services and plan all of that within the day. But in the day, we have what we call an enrichment period, where we meet the kids where they are, and whether that is to get pulled out for tutoring or whether they're in an enrichment program, I mean, like a gifted program. But all those kids are given what they need at that point. It's great. And yeah, and I think one of the most important things that we teach the kids, because it is such a community effort, is that we teach the kids to advocate for themselves. So the kids will come up to me as a teacher or whoever and say, you know, I don't get this, or I need help in this. So we know how to help them. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's such great insight coming from the teacher's perspective. I think a big key in all of this too is that, you know, we wouldn't be where we are at now, or we wouldn't be able to do these things and provide these systems of support as a culture in our school without parents. And Lauren's perspective is so key in us understanding and being successful in all of this.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm going to hit on kind of the same themes, and it's because that culture piece, it's part of the DNA at St. Austin's. But communication, as a parent, it feels alone sometimes in the beginning when you start to see your kiddos really start to struggle. But then as soon as this team like wraps their arms around a child, in my case, it's been all three of my children, and you really start to share your lens and your perspective. And I got to hear Barbara's perspective, and I got to hear Gabby's perspective, and Tara's perspective, and my child's perspective. Having all of those different lenses to be able to look at what the situation is, what the experience of everybody is, and then how we come together in this open-minded way about testing different strategies, I think is really clear and helpful. And I think also as a parent, like getting coaching from Gabby on like, hey, you seem to be implementing these strategies and they may not be working. Why don't we think about this? And then being able to talk to Barbara and say, I'm not going to do the homework assignment that way with my child. Are you okay if I do it this way? And her saying, yes, do it this other way, gave me the coaching and the reassurance that I needed. So having pretty fluid communication is really helpful. And then I think having empathy, what Tara talked about, is huge. My children, every child has a set of incredible strengths, and being able to recognize those and reinforce those while also supporting the areas that are a challenge was critical in helping all of my children build confidence and still work in these really critical areas that they needed help with. So I think it's that communication, being open-minded, getting feedback and coaching as a parent, and then also reminding these children what their amazing strengths are and giving them as many at-bats as they can get in those strength areas.
Absolutely. I think those are all really key points. And you hit on a couple different things in that this team effort and this ability to, we have to have all of the stakeholders in this process. And that leads to that second question. How are stakeholders included in the many stages of supports and interventions? And that's so key, because if we don't have everyone involved, including the student, we are not going to be successful. We would not be where we are today. Everything would be much different. And that's something that we bear a lot of weight on, is making sure that we have everybody on board. Ms. Ceballos, can you give us a few insights on that inclusion of stakeholders?
So what we, again, this process has been a very long process, as Barbara mentioned, and we just add a little bit every year. So we can't go from 0 to 100, as you know. So over the years, the 13 years, we have built up quite a lot of contacts with outside therapists, with certified academic language therapists, with diagnosticians or psychologists. So we really have a process where we refer out in multiples, because not everyone's good for everybody. We really try to understand the process, because parents, as Lauren mentioned, it feels very alone, and we recognize that. That's part of that empathy. So if we know what parents are coming to, we know that we need to give them some sort of process. So we have, a referral sheet that gives them places that take insurance, that don't. And we kind of tell them how to start, because starting, I think, is the biggest obstacle. We all know how challenging that can be sometimes. So we make sure that the stakeholders that we feel are necessary in that initial stages of diagnoses, that the parents have a good roadmap. Then when it comes into, once a child is diagnosed and is receiving whatever kind of therapy it is, it's not always on our campus. And so that's where it's really important for us to communicate with the parents about the village, as we call it, and knowing that we don't always have, while Gabby and I may have our master's in special education and specializing in 2 different areas, we don't have all the answers, and we're not there doing the therapy as much anymore. So we recognize that we have a lot to learn from these outside individuals. So we want that collaboration from an OT or a speech path. We invite these individuals to come in and observe for a period of time. We're in the room with them as well, just so we can all share notes of what we observe. So really inviting them into our school to collaborate, trying to break down those it's us against them kind of barriers, because that's not going to be helpful to the child, which is all of our goals. Yeah, so that was, in terms of just kind of looking at the top, how I feel like we bring our stakeholders into the entire process.
Yeah, and Tara, if I can just tag on to that, I am a parent of a child who was diagnosed here as well. And so I kind of had that teacher and parent point of view. And I can just say, I was, Gabby and Tara really earned my trust. And I think that's so important for parents to trust us and to believe that we truly have their kids' best interests at heart. And I saw that with my own child. And, now she's going into now she is in high school, and she has taken everything that she's learned from our little community and taken that with her, and, making connections with her high school teachers and stuff like that. And I truly believe that she wouldn't have gotten that unless she had gone through what she did here at school. So I think that parent buy-in is huge. I think just earning that trust of the parents, but also the kids themselves. And, we talk about this all the time when we have team meetings and parent-child meetings, and just for those kids to see that we're all on the same team for them, it just makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And both Tara and Barbara, you mentioned a village and a team. I often refer to and tell the kids and tell the families, we're on team so-and-so, we're on team Tara or team Barbara. And when we relate it to a team, and the kids, it's such an easy point of reference for them. They've either been in sports or they've been on some kind of team. They start to see us as partners and not just as my teacher and somebody that tells me what to do, or my parents who kind of direct me all the time. They start trusting us a little bit more. And I think for the parents too, making it more of like a real life example and allowing them to have other language that they can use. And I've heard parents, after I've kind of started using that language, say, we're on team Tara or on team Barbara, and all we're trying to do is support you and help you be more successful. Lauren, can you give us some pointers on how we've gotten stakeholders kind of included in this process?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have kind of laid out the methodology of the process. And I think as a parent, you're in the ring with your kid and you're watching them struggle in whatever facet it is. And to have you guys, warm hand reach out to say, hey, are you seeing the things that we're seeing? Or are you seeing something different? And providing that entree to share perspective. And then that list Tara mentioned of here's the references and the resources, so that I, as the parent, can go make an appointment with someone that you guys already know and you have credibility with, and that knows what St. Austin's does and does really well. That's very helpful. And then being able to facilitate those assessment appointments, and then get the report back and sit down with Gabby and Barbara and walk through it and say, okay, now we're looking at it like a set of scientists. We have this hypothesis, we've developed these sets of strategies, let's test them, and then let's pivot, and then let's take what's working and then scale that into specials or other tutoring or the following grades. Now that it's been my third rodeo, I feel like, I get it and I know what to expect. But I think for a new parent, it does feel a little bit daunting, but just keep encouraging the parents to keep participating in the process, because you will go through it and you'll learn a lot through the process. But being able to lay that out and say, here's what to expect and here's the end in mind that we're striving towards, makes it more digestible and makes it feel like we're clear about the outcome and what everybody's role in the process is. And I think that's helpful, just clarifying stakeholder engagement from the get-go.
Gabby, if I could just add on a couple of things real fast. You know, I know that Barbara mentioned advocacy or someone did, and I think in the stakeholder process, we do wherever appropriate. And you can't say it's one particular grade because it really depends on the child and their maturity. Is wherever it's appropriate for them to be included at the table. When we're talking about, more student centric, this is happening in the classroom. We need you to make some different changes. We include that child at the table as well. We do talk with the parents first, and then we'll include the student. And we talked about trust, and we all know trust is earned. And I think, again, talking about that culture of supports and bringing the stakeholder and that journey is that really, fine tuning your language, because sometimes it's the difference of changing a word, from dealing to, fostering. There's different words that we can use that are off-putting. So I think really it's thinking about the power of words and how that plays into getting everybody on the same page and on this team. And it's just remembering it's not easy. I wouldn't say that for us who've been doing it a long time, if we have 10 new families in a year, that they're all just going to jump on our train and, it's easy street train. It might be, we're lucky if it's 7 out of 10 that year and there's 3 that we're working on. And it's a process, and not to get frustrated with the parents, to remember that empathy and the journey that they're on.
And Tara, just to throw in something, the other day, this was so weird. I saw a parent who was here several years ago, and this parent told me, we should have listened to you, because the advice that we had given them, they are now following in high school. And and they said, now they're doing it, and it's just made a huge difference in their kids' life. But that's okay.
Exactly, that's okay. Right. I always say water on the rock. Eventually it will wear it away, and wherever that person hits the point where they reach out to do the right thing for their child is the right journey for them.
Right, exactly.
Well, I appreciate all of you coming in and having this kind of conversation. We've never done this before, and it was pretty insightful for me as the student sports specialist, and I'm sure for all of us. We talk and we meet together all the time, but I think being able to kind of talk about this gives us a really good understanding kind of as a whole picture, and we hope we were able to do that for y'all too.
Thank you.
Thank you all for a wonderful discussion. It was really great to have a window into how schools use interventions and supports for students who are struggling. We did have a few questions come into the Q&A, and I believe Gabby will be addressing those as they come in. But we did have a couple of questions come through registration that we have also posed to the panel. So our next question, our first question is, what are some of the struggles that you have encountered while implementing interventions and supports in your school?
All right, so I think I'll take this. I think that from my perspective, kind of the biggest struggle that we have is, going back to the second question, getting all of our stakeholders on board for each of the conversations, parents, teachers, and students. I think sometimes parents are kind of shocked a little bit and hard to process all of this information. So getting the parents on board is really key. And even to this year, having struggles with getting parents on board, or them thinking sometimes that just time is going to, fix the problems or things that we're seeing right now. And then that also kind of coming into play and whether or not they choose to be in this process at all. And part of that too is also, those conversations are definitely more successful when the teacher's on board. But we've also had, circumstances and instances in where the teacher's not on board. And it takes either quite a long time to work through getting the teacher on board, or in some cases they may not be on board and they're just doing it to do it. We're incredibly blessed to have numerous teachers who are always on board and want to work through every single thing, and circumstances like with Lauren and getting on board and She's worked through this 3 times with us and has done, a phenomenal job as an advocate for her children. So I think it just depends on the circumstance, but for me and kind of what I've experienced, it's for sure getting those stakeholders on board.
Yeah, to build off that, Gabby, just from a parent perspective, I think the pain for me as a parent had to get pretty significant, like kind of to the point where I felt like I was at the end of my rope. Like I didn't know what else to do for my child. And it was frustrating, and I was using strategies that I used as a kid that weren't the right strategies for this child because they're a completely different human being. And I kind of had to hit my bottom as a parent and listen to Barbara and Gabby and Tara. And I mean, I point blank was asking Gabby at one point, like, what do I do? Because I see my child struggling and I'm struggling alongside them. And I know there are other parents who don't believe it's their child because their child's perfect and it's the school or it's the teacher or it's whatever. And I encourage parents to be open-minded and share in some curiosity and put the child at the center of all your decision making. These people are here in this village to help them be successful. We got to have some effective failure and some constructive conversation to really get at the root cause of what's going on. And my behavior as a parent has to change. My perspective as a parent has to change in order to best support that child. And quite frankly, the teachers and the staff who are helping support the child as well. So I think you're spot on about the parent buy-in and that process, and it's not easy. And I just kudos to you guys for sticking with us as parents.
That's great. And I see a lot of questions coming into the QA. I'm going to hopefully be able to address some of these towards the end of our discussion with the panel. But let me address our second question that we have is, would you provide an example of the process that takes place when a child is identified as struggling or needing additional supports?
All right, well, I'll take that question. So the process that we have established when a child is struggling or identified as struggling is, as we've mentioned before, we have weekly team meetings. So we are constantly talking about students that are on teachers' radars. Being a small school, we, myself and Gabby, have been watching students for many, many years. I mentioned how we are constantly improving our knowledge. Early identification, extremely important. So we've been watching these kids since pre-K. So by the time they really start to struggle, it's not always a surprise to us. But those team meetings is where we first talk about them. We bring our data, we bring our standardized benchmarking data. Teachers are bringing data and artifacts from the classroom, kind of writing samples and spelling tests and math and different things. We of course would be talking with the previous teacher. At that point, we would ask the teacher to do maybe a few weeks, three or so weeks of tutoring. So asking the teacher to bring in the student after school. We work on a few different strategies that Gabby or I think that would really help benefit that student, to see if that is just a little bit of tweak in the instruction. And then at that point, we reconvene again at our weekly meeting. We do some progress monitoring in that process as well on those skills that we feel like there's a gap. And if we're not seeing the improvement and we have enough data to suggest that there's something else going on than just instruction in the classroom, we then bring in the parents and we really kind of lay out all of the information and really talk about the characteristics that we're seeing and those kinds of areas of struggle. Again, dyslexia being our largest one, because it does make up the largest majority of learning differences, but there's always attention that we'll just be discussing. Sometimes it is autism. And so we really kind of lay out those characteristics that we see that the children are experiencing. We talk to the parents about, hey, is there any family history of anything? Because we know genetics are very strong and powerful. And then from that process, if our parents are magically on board, then we would recommend for them to get further assessment, further testing. So really a full evaluation. And that's where we give them a whole list of references to go out and get these full and individual evaluations or psychoeducational evaluations from the professionals in the area. And after that point, then they come back with the evaluation, and we kind of go over the findings together. Again, everything is done together as a team, and really kind of talk about what we're seeing and how it's impacting them educationally in the classroom, and then what kind of supports we can put into place. But also, you know, therapy is very important for us because we can only support so much, but if we're not remediating whatever that learning difference is, that is going to be where we're not going to be successful. So really lining up those appropriate therapies for whatever that diagnosis is.
It looks like we have a few minutes, and there have been a lot of questions that have come into the chat. One of them was, do you all work with LEAs or the child find process? And Gabby's responded, we do. We work with our local school district through the evaluation process if it's the parent's choice to do so. I am the school representative in this area and work with the LEAs and parents throughout the process. We attend meetings throughout the year at the district level to stay up to date on any requirements and contacts. So Gabby, thank you as we're moving forward to be responding to these questions. And I think she's moving forward and responding with other questions. And we will circle back with y'all later, hopefully in the presentation, if time allows, to be able to address those as well. Our next portion of this is going to, we feel really lucky to have the opportunity to showcase a few of the many federal center resources. Please take advantage of these free and available tools and resources for families and schools. So today, Dr. Stacy Hurt will highlight tools and resources from the National Center on Intensive Intervention, also known as NCII. Following NCII, Dr. Kelsey Morris will showcase the Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, also known as PBIS. Finally, Dr. Crystalyn Brown will return to present on behalf of the Progress Center. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Stacy Hurt, who supports knowledge development and products for the National Center on Intensive Intervention. In this role, she supports technical reviews of screening tools, product development, and dissemination. In addition, she serves as a knowledge development researcher for the Progress Center. Stacy has over 20 years of special education field and leadership experience in K through 12. Stacy, I'm going to hand it to you.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to add one more. In addition, I'm also a parent of a 7th grader with an auditory processing disorder at a private school here in Columbia, Missouri. So excited to be here today. My goal with NCII is to share a brief overview. I will then highlight NCII's approach to intensive intervention and DBI. Next, I'll share features of the tools chart when selecting assessments and strategies. I'll then share our key website tabs to access resources, sample lessons, and instructional strategies. And in closing, I'll share how to stay connected with NCII. So I want to note, if you would like to use any of these slides and notes to embed in your own professional learning trainings with pre-service and in-service teachers, please feel free to email me and I will be happy to share them with you. So a little bit about NCII. Our mission of NCII is to build knowledge and capacity of state and local leaders, faculty and PD providers, educators, and other stakeholders to support implementation of intensive intervention for students with severe and persistent learning and/or social, emotional, or behavioral needs using data-based individualization. This next slide is a snapshot of our NCII home screen. So you can find us at www.intensiveintervention.org. As you can see, the NCII website includes a wealth of information. So I'm just going to highlight a few for you. On that top tab of that toolbar, NCII features information about DBI, the tools chart, implementation and intervention, training, special topics, resources by audience, and news and events. So if you're new to NCII, I would suggest taking 5 or 10 minutes just to click around and get to know the site and get familiar with our content and resources. So a little bit about NCII's approach. So NCII is a process that is fluid. It is a systematic method for using data to determine when and how to provide more intensive intervention. DBI is a process, not a program. And at last, intensive intervention is designed for students with severe and persistent learning and behavioral needs. So on the far right, you'll see NCI's approach in a form of an infographic. So as you can see, it's very, very fluid. So to learn a little bit about DBI, if you and your team are looking to bolster your current implementation of DBI, you're at the right place. The NCII website features everything you've ever wanted to know about DBI from a meta level to micro level. So we've pulled a few highlights for you here on this slide. On the far left, you'll see a broad description of DBI. We take you step by step through the process with examples. In the middle, you'll see a screenshot of our self-paced learning modules. So this is a perfect time of year to use our learning modules to serve as a refresher or booster session for your educators and support staff. All of our modules featured on the site take approximately 30 minutes and they are completely free. And so we're hearing a lot from our sites that are using these for professional learning. We're kind of doing like a book club format, as in educators are taking the courses self-paced and then coming together during staff time to connect and dive deeper into the learning modules. On the far right, you'll see a tip sheet outlining the DBI process. Our site features a ton of tip sheets. This is just one example. And as you can see, our tip sheets are user-friendly and digestible for early implementers of DBI. So the next slide highlights our tools chart. So I'm going to give you like a quick snapshot. Under the tools chart, users can select evidence-based interventions and assessments that meet standards for technical rigor and address specific needs. So what is a tools chart? Tools chart here, it displays expert ratings on the technical rigor of assessments and interventions. All the products featured are reviewed by an external technical review committee of experts. And products are rated against established criteria. So we're not comparing them and we're not ranking them. So I really like to equate the tools chart to consumer reports. So NCII does not endorse tools. We simply share the tools and information that meet technical rigor. On the far left here, you'll see a snapshot of our academic progress monitoring tools chart home screen. In the gray, you'll see a filter. So this is a key feature on our site. So here you can click through. Are you looking to target academics or behavior? Perhaps you're looking to target math or reading. And here you can also target specific grade levels and then a cost range if you would like to access a specific price point. Here you can use the NCI website feature to meet any of your instructional needs. So on the far right, you'll see a snapshot of design descriptors. So here we take a deep dive into just the quality of design of the interventions and assessments. NCII has developed 6 tools charts to assist educators and families in becoming informed consumers. So the 6 include 2 intervention, which is academic and behavior, and then the other 4 fall under assessment. So you'll find academic and behavior screening tools, and then also academic and behavior progress monitoring tools. The next slide highlights sample lessons and strategies. So this screenshot, it has several sample lessons and strategies. These highlighted examples provide specific samples of academic and behavior interventions targeting intensive intervention within the context of a classroom setting. So again, I recommend just taking some time to click through here to match the resources with instructional need. So here, I just want to remind you, you can find us at www.intensiveintervention.org and stay connected with us. So in closing, I'd like to share just a few ways to connect with us. Next slide, please. And pop one more slide. So there's a few different ways. So at our website, you can sign up for the NCII newsletter. And here we push out all recent events, webinars such as this, tools, resources to keep you up to date on current database individualization and NCII events. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter at the NCII, and we will connect with you any way we can. So do use our free resources to train staff on DBI and intensive intervention for academics and behavior. Again, these are great for pre-service and in-service teachers, and it works great for a flipped training model. So if you have any questions following this session, please feel free to email me at shirt. Again, it's shurt@air.org, or find me on Twitter at Stacy Hurt, PhD. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate it. And if you can kind of take a look at the chat, Dr. Bailey was able to put in all the links that Stacy presented during her session. So feel free to click on those and get more familiar with the work around NCII. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Kelsey Morris. Next slide, please. Dr. Kelsey Morris is an assistant research professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Missouri and the co-director of the University of Missouri Center for School-Wide Positive Behavior Support. He is a national scholar with the technical assistance, publications, and research focused on PBIS, classroom management, database decision-making, and district-wide implementation of PBIS. Dr. Morris is the past vice president of the International Association for Positive Behavior Support Board of Directors and serves as an implementation partner for the National Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Programs, and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. Today, he'll provide resources to assist educators in implementing and sustaining PBIS across an extended array of contexts. Let's welcome Dr. Morris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Kelsey Morris. I'm an assistant research professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Missouri and co-director of the University of Missouri Center for School-Wide Positive Behavior Support, or PBS. Our center is one of the 4 co-directing institutions for the National Center on PBIS, where I am an implementation partner. The National Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, or PBIS, simply called the Center on PBIS, is funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs and Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. You might know that PBIS is an evidence-based tiered framework for supporting students' behavioral, academic, social, emotional, and mental health strengths and needs. When implemented with fidelity, PBIS improves social emotional competence, academic success, and school climate. An additional bonus is that it's been shown to improve teacher health and well-being. And ultimately, it's a way to create positive, predictable, equitable, and safe learning environments where everyone thrives. Now, PBIS is not a purchased curriculum or something you learn during a single professional development event. Rather, it's an ongoing commitment to supporting students, educators, and families through systems change. When you implement PBIS well, students experience improved behavioral, social, emotional, and academic outcomes. Schools and programs reduce their use of exclusionary discipline practices and improve their overall climate. Now, I'm excited to be with you to give you an overview of the many free resources that are available to you and anyone from our Center on PBIS website. So let's take a look. So what I want to do with you all today is just give you a really simple overview or a flyover, if you will, on our National Center's website. And so it's easy to access from anywhere. It's just www.pbis.org. And so what I'm going to do with you is just walk you through, and we'll start with the menu bar that's across the top to help you orient and just kind of find resources simply and easily. So under the PBIS option, you can see that there's a bunch of information to help you get started on your journey. If you're looking for more information about what PBIS is, what it's about, kind of its evidence base, or why it's important to implement, there's great information there too. We know of schools that use this information to help start a conversation with their staff and their faculty, or if they get questions from their community or from families in the school and they want some really solid information to share out, this is a great place to go. As well, when you begin that implementation journey, either at tier 1, 2, or 3, there's solid information here to help you frame your thinking and better understand what all is involved at each of those tiers. Under our topics page, you can see that there's a long list of options that are available for people to dig a bit more into PBIS in its different implementation areas. So maybe you're interested in bullying prevention, or you're interested in classroom PBIS. What does this look like when we translate it from the school-wide level to the classroom level? Or maybe you're interested in things that are pertaining to students with disabilities. You can see there's a long list of topics here. Each topic will open its own topic page, and you can kind of see that in the background, what that might look like. So here is an example of the school-wide topic page as well as the classroom PBIS topic page. Now, each of these will start with its own kind of information or its background, just a way to kind of think about it and frame the conversation. And then as you scroll down on each page, it's going to give you more opportunities to see presentations on those topics that have been done at, say, our national conference, exemplars from around the country where we see this work being done with a high level of fidelity. You'll also have the opportunity to access additional publications on each one of these. That's one of the things that our center does, is we have our co-directing institutions and our implementation partners. We're actually working with schools day in and day out to see this work unfold and to provide technical assistance and coaching. And then we produce practice briefs or practice guides or takeaway documents. So you'll see as you browse our website that there's a lot of resources that you can use to help you enhance your work with implementing PBIS. Here's an example of our database decision-making page. One of the things that we talk about when implementing PBIS is that it's important to make decisions based upon data. And so there's more information about database decision-making. There's some great videos on there to watch teams actually work through using a team-initiated problem-solving framework to really look at data and make decisions. The example here of our students with disabilities page, that's been a big focus for our center, making sure that we've got, and if you go here and browse, there's going to be a lot of great resources to help a building understand how can I make sure that I'm creating a system where students with disabilities are benefiting from our tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports and resources. So that way we're really educating and supporting all children on our campus. Under the tools section, we've got a lot of tools that we've developed from our center to help people keep their fingers on the pulse of what's going on with implementation and making sure that they're implementing with a high level of fidelity. So the one that we advocate for the most and use at the campus level or the building level the most is what's known as the tiered fidelity inventory. And so there's a series of questions for each of the 3 tiers, and you can choose, are we implementing tier 1 and we just want to check on our tier 1 implementation status, or what is the combination of tiers that you're implementing at, and then using these questions to check your fidelity. And then what teams do is take their responses from these questions and turn those into an action plan. What are we going to focus on this year? What are we going to focus on next year? Where are we strong and we want to sustain? Where is there room for improvement? And we want to look for opportunities to develop new systems or training and coaching to enhance our practices in those areas. There's also some additional tools that we craft called blueprints. And so these are kind of our seminal documents, if you will. You know, there's the PBS evaluation blueprint that I included a snapshot here to help you understand as we're implementing PBIS, whether it's at a district level or a systems level or a building level, how do we go about doing that? What do we think about? What are the essential questions to ask? We've also got a training and professional development blueprint. Part of implementing with fidelity is actually knowing what it is that we're doing or that we're striving to do. So there's a great blueprint there that walks through the concept of training and professional development, but also digs a bit deeper to understand who do we need to pull this off. And there's some great resources and tools in there specifically around scope and sequence for training. If you're going to create training opportunities or you're looking for training opportunities, what is it that you need to know and be able to do? There's a great scope and sequence at the back of that document. And then last but not least, the implementation blueprint. That was probably our first document and our arguably most important seminal document to make sure that we have this solid understanding of how do we implement PBIS. Under publications, we're constantly updating this list here with everything that our center partners, our implementation partners are doing to move good work forward and to make it accessible for people like you who are doing the real work and working hard each and every day to support the students that you come into contact with. So under this publication section, some things that we've recently published are strategies for de-escalating student behavior in the classroom or supporting students with autism spectrum disorders through school-wide PBIS. And the one that has been very popular, it's brand new, but it's gotten a lot of hits on our website, is creating a classroom teaching matrix. So one of the things that we talk about in PBIS is just making sure that we're teaching students what our expected behaviors are. This translates that practice from a school-wide setting into a classroom setting for classroom level teachers. And then some new documents that were released this year are pertaining to Tier 3 systems. Specifically, we've packaged that as a student level systems guide, school level systems guide, and a district level systems guide, providing important information, look-fors, considerations, examples of what does it take to create solid infrastructure, solid systems for those students that need things that are more intensive and more individualized. Each year we hold a national PBIS leadership forum where we bring in exemplars and leaders, whether they're classroom level leaders or district level leaders or even state level leaders from across the country to present on a series of topics. And so you can always go to our conference section of the website, look at past conferences, especially during the pandemic. It was a virtual event, so you can watch recorded sessions from past conferences and access the presentation materials as well. And if you're looking for more information about PBIS in your state, we always encourage people to go to the About section of our website, find your state and identify who is the state coordinator for your area. Contact them to learn more about implementing PBIS. So again, I'm Dr. Kelsey Morris. I'm an implementation partner with the National Center on PBIS. And it's a pleasure to give you a brief overview of our website and our free resources. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Kelsey. And I see a few questions have come in for Kelsey, and I will circle back with him and make sure that we get a response and host it or provide it back to the person who provided the question. Now I'd like to welcome back Dr. Crystalline Brown. As I mentioned, Dr. Brown, in addition to her multiple roles, is the Intensive Technical Assistance Co-Lead for the Progress Center. Chrissy, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you, Sheedy, for that introduction. So now I'm just going to go over a few resources and documents that are available through the Progress Center to help educators with guidance on the development and implementation of high quality IEPs and just supports for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So I want to start by reminding you about how our center and in fact, our website is centered around the development and implementation of high quality educational program for students who need additional supports. We start with the development of high quality educational programming times the implementation, including the implementation of high quality educational program, which promotes improved access and outcomes for appropriate public education. Next slide, please. So what you see on the screen right now is a screenshot of the Progress Center's homepage, which can be accessed at www.promotingprogress.org. As mentioned earlier, our website is centered around the development and implementation of high-quality educational programming for students with disabilities. Notice the tabs near the top of the screen. The website is laid out so users can easily find resources devoted to development as well as implementation of high-quality educational programming. There's also news and events. We have resources and tools, training, and about the staff, as well as our educators and residents. So starting with the development tab, building off this idea, we first would like to highlight the development tab, which is located at the far left on the top of the screen. When you click this development tab, you will see 7 different sections, or the blue boxes here, which aligns with some of the components of IEP development. There are multiple ways to access these resources, but to keep that idea of development to implementation, these links pathways work as well. And so a few examples were of the different sections of the IEP. Next, we have examples of development resources. You'll find several different types of resources, such as the IEP tip sheets. We have self-paced training modules, as well as archived webinars. Throughout the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about these resources and how you might use them. Next, we have the implementation tab. This page provides an overview of what we consider to be the ecosystem of the right stuff at the right time. These sections here highlight key implementation considerations and resources and are what helped build a holistic ecosystem within a school. Some of these include effective delivery of services, belonging, the data collection, and ongoing teaming. We have instructional practice briefs. There's a 6-step protocol for progress monitoring, performance feedback, as well as goal setting for instructional routines. And we have additional archived webinars focused on belonging. How are students included in their educational programming? Another feature we want to highlight is a location to find resources geared toward educators. To find these targeted resources, you can move your cursor over the Resource and Tools tab and select for educators from the drop-down. There's also tabs for families and students, for faculty and PD providers, and then stories from the classroom. Next, another resources are self-paced training modules. To find these, you can select the training tab near the top of your screen. These online courses are intended to build educators and administrators' knowledge with the focus on how to develop and implement high-quality educational programming. The courses are housed in the Progress Center and National Center on Intensive Intervention Learning Modules Library. Currently in our self-paced learning modules, there's Introduction to Federal and State Laws Impacting Students with Disabilities, the IEP team, Who's Who and Other Considerations, IDEA and the IEP, From Compliance to Progress, the What and Why of Measurable Annual Goals, the Path to Progress, Developing and Implementing High-Quality Educational Programs, then What and Why of Present Levels of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance, or PLAF, Introduction to Intensive Intervention, Planning for Instruction and What Teachers Need to Know, and there are many more on the way. If you find one you might be interested in viewing, click the link to find more information about the course, including an overview of the course, and related resources for the topic of the module. If you decide to go ahead with the modules, you can access it by clicking the green bar located at the top right hand of your screen. It also provides information about the duration of the module. So for instance, the Introduction to Federal and State Law Impacting Students with Disabilities is approximately 30 minutes long. You can always pause and come back to pick up wherever you left off at. It provides the audience as well as law and policy that's included in the module. Registering for self-paced learning modules. In order to access these modules, you do have to create an account. This will also help to keep track of which modules have been completed. These modules and tip sheets are a great way to flip your university classroom or to have teachers come prepared having completed this pre-work so that they have a foundation to start. You can utilize these modules as well as for professional development purposes. We also have an additional resource from Stories from the Classroom. So where can you find the stories? Go to the home page and click on the resource tab. Here you will see the stories from the classroom. Our stories from the classroom include stories from viewing disability rights as an equity issue, hearing parents' priorities, stories about belonging, finding belonging in the school setting, appreciating high expectations, words matter, and special considerations for English learners with IEPs. These stories from the classroom include perspectives from students, parents, educators, as well as related service providers. We talk about belonging, honoring parent perspectives, language, having high expectations, inclusion activities, and disability as an equity issue. If there's any questions, you can drop them in the chat or you can contact the Progress Center. You can also email me directly. I'll drop my email in the chat. To stay connected with the Progress Center, you can connect with us on Facebook, as well as Twitter, or join our mailing list to get the latest updates.
Thank you, Chrissy. I really appreciate your time in showcasing the Progress Center. Again, if anybody has any questions for any of the federal centers, feel free to put them in the Q&A or chat, and we'll make sure to respond to you. And then the Progress Center website, has he just put the link in the chat? Feel free to connect, please. They have a great amount of resources. In terms of all the questions that have come in through Q&A, I believe quite a few of them have been responded to, and some of the responses have been provided in the chat by Gabby and also by Pamela, so thank you both in addressing those questions. We want to thank you for joining the Progress Center Private School Forum, Interventions and Supports for Promoting Progress in Private Schools. As Chrissy mentioned, please take a moment to visit our website and join our listserv. The recording of this forum is going to be posted there as well. We are currently planning, and David and Pamela both mentioned this, so we are currently planning the private school open door, and the date is on November 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Please note, this will not be recorded. This is an opportunity to have an open conversation with educators and parents. Whoever wants to come is welcome. What we're planning to do is to continue the conversation on MTSS. So we encourage you to please register for this event using the link that is going to be in the chat box shortly. Finally, after the forum, you're going to receive an email to complete our survey. Please take a few minutes to provide feedback. Both the Progress Center and the survey link will be found in the chat. We will also, as I said, be sending you an email shortly. Thank you once again, and please enjoy your week.